The thing that hit me about No Cage Can Hold is that it doesn't slowly invite you in. It grabs you by the collar and shoves you face first into the concrete. There's no easing into this prison. From the opening shots, you can practically taste the rust and sweat in the air. This baked-in sense that violence isn't an event here, it's the weather. And on Flick Flare, I've talked about a lot of gritty dramas. But this one, it's not interested in looking cool. It wants you uncomfortable. If you like this kind of deep dive breakdown, by the way, feel free to hit subscribe and stick around. Because this show gives us a lot to chew on, and I have thoughts. What's interesting is that on paper, the setup sounds familiar. High security prison, corrupt guards, gangs running the place, an inmate who refuses to be broken. You've seen that line before. But the execution here is really sharp. The first episode builds this feeling that the prison itself is a living thing, like a huge, ugly animal that just eats people. You get these shots of the walls and watchtowers that linger a few seconds longer than feels normal. The camera almost daring you to look for a way out and then reminding you there isn't one. The show keeps coming back to that. Visually, no wide open sky, always some sort of bar, mesh, or shadow cutting the frame. It's claustrophobia by design. At the center of all that is the young inmate, he's clearly the emotional entry point for the audience. But he's not played as some perfect innocent. He's scared, he's reactive, he says the wrong thing to the wrong person more than once. And that's part of why the tension works. You're not watching some superhero adapt instantly to prison life. You're watching a kid who looks like he stepped off a bus and into hell. And his body hasn't caught up to the fact that the rules changed overnight. Every little flinch around the older inmates, every stare he holds a second too long, it all adds this layer of dread. You know those tiny mistakes will matter. Balancing him is that determined prisoner the story teases. This older guy who's clearly done a lot of time and refuses to let the place eat his soul. The show never makes him into a saint, and that's key. He's got a reputation, he's done things he's not proud of. And you feel it in the way other inmates move around him. There's respect, but there's fear too. What I loved is that his inner resistance isn't loud. It's in the way he keeps some routines, the way he looks for tiny ways to assert choice in a place where everything is dictated to you. Folding his blanket just so. Refusing to look away when a guard tries to humiliate him. Snatching one small victory out of 1,000 losses. It's stubbornness as survival. The relationship between those two, this young inmate who still believes in outside rules, and the older guy who only trusts what he's seen behind those walls, that becomes the emotional spine of the series. They're not instantly friends. There's a lot of friction, a lot of don't talk to me unless you have to. And the show makes you sit in that awkward distance instead of rushing to the mentor-protege cliche. There's this early scene in the cafeteria where the young guy almost gets sucked into someone else's fight just by being in the wrong seat. He's frozen, doesn't know which way to move, and you see the older prisoner watching him from across the room, weighing whether to intervene. The camera stays on his face just long enough that you realize he's not deciding whether he can help. He's deciding whether this kid is even worth the risk. And that's the thing this series does so well. Every choice feels like it has a cost. You help someone? That's a debt. You look away? That's a betrayal. You speak up to a guard? That's a mark on your back. Even the quiet moments feel brittle, like they could shatter into violence. There's this constant calculation underneath everything. Who saw what? Who owes who? Who's being watched? And the show doesn't over-explain the prison politics with exposition dumps. You kind of learn the rules the way the new guy does, by watching people get hurt when they break them. Where it gets really intriguing, though, is when the story starts hinting at those illegal experiments and conspiracies the synopsis teases. At first, it's just whispers, an inmate who disappears overnight, a wing that's suddenly under maintenance for weeks, a guy coming back from the infirmary quieter than he left, like some light behind his eyes got switched off. You might think it's just standard issue prison brutality, and in some ways it is. But then the camera lingers on a bruise that doesn't look like it came from fists, or you hear a faint mechanical sound behind a supposedly solid wall. They seed it in piece by piece. The guards, obviously, are a big piece of that puzzle. One thing I appreciated is that the show doesn't flatten them into a single evil cop template. Some are outright monsters, enjoying the power trip, and those are upsetting to watch in exactly the way they should be. But then you've got the ones who feel like they're in over their heads, or they're just trying to get through their shift, and that's almost more unnerving. You see one of them hesitate before following through on an order, or exchange a look with an inmate they clearly know is innocent of whatever rumors going around, and then they still do the thing. It's that banality of complicity that really sticks under your skin. And in the middle of all of this are the gangs. The leaders are terrifying not because they're loud, but because they don't have to be. The show has this habit of filming them from a low angle, slightly off center. So even when they're doing something as mundane as drinking coffee in the yard, the whole frame feels warped around them. When they're talking to the young inmate, there's always this disturbing calm to their voices. They'll ask about his family like they're catching up with an old friend, but the subtext is pure threat. It's a calm promise. You belong to someone here, whether you like it or not. There's an early stretch where the young inmate gets pulled between factions, and you can feel him trying to cling to this idea that if he just keeps his head down, he can avoid choosing sides. The show is ruthless about undercutting that fantasy. There's a moment where he's forced to pass along a small favor, a message, a packet, something seemingly trivial, from one group to another. It feels minor. Then you see who notices, who doesn't, and suddenly this kid has picked a side he didn't even know he was picking. It's one of those slow burn realizations. In a place like this, not choosing is still a choice. What really sold me on the show, though, was the way it balances those big thriller elements with genuine emotional intimacy. You have your violent set pieces, your shakedowns, your yard showdowns, sure. But then you'll get a 5-minute scene of two guys just talking through the bars at night. No music, barely any cutting, just low voices and the distant echo of someone shouting 3 cells down. The conversations aren't always grand speeches about freedom and justice. Sometimes it's arguing over a memory, or confessing what keeps them awake, or just describing what their old street smelled like after it rained. You feel the ache of being trapped in routines and recycled stories. There's one sequence that really stuck with me. It's late at night, most of the wing is quiet except for the occasional cough or muttered insult drifting down the hallway. The camera tracks slowly past cell after cell, catching these tiny glimpses. A guy doing push-ups in the dark, another just staring at the ceiling, someone quietly crying with their back turned to the door. Then it stops on the young inmate, sitting on the edge of his bunk, hands over his ears, trying to block out a beating happening somewhere out of sight. You don't see the fight. You just hear it, dull thuds, a choked yell, a guard's keys jingling. The older prisoner, in the next cell, starts talking to him through the wall. Not about what's happening. He starts describing the taste of a real cup of coffee, or a bus ride, or standing in line at a grocery store. Normal stuff. Mundane stuff. It's like he's trying to drag the kid's mind out of the building for a second, give him a tiny window. The sound design there is brutal and beautiful. The violence never fully goes away, but the voices thread through it, thin and human. That's where the show's sound design flexes in general. Metal doors slamming here don't sound like generic stock effects. They sound embarrassingly loud, too sharp, like your eardrums flinch every time. The echo of footsteps in the hallway tells you how empty or full a scene is before the camera even turns the corner. There's this rattling, constant hum, ventilation, fluorescent lights, whatever, that gives the whole place a nervous system buzz. And then they use silence really deliberately. When something important is about to be revealed, it's like the air itself goes still. Footsteps stop. Distant chatter drops out. That sudden vacuum of noise becomes its own kind of alarm bell. Visually, no cage can hold sits in this ugly beautiful space. The color palette is a lot of grays, washed out greens, sickly yellows from the artificial lighting. On paper, that sounds dreary. but the way they light faces within that world is really striking. In a lot of scenes, you've got one harsh overhead source throwing shadows under eyes, making everyone look a little haunted. But in rare moments, you get a sliver of natural light creeping in through a tiny window, and the show really milks those. There's an early morning shot in the yard where the sun is low and every bit of barbed wire is catching that golden edge. And for like 2 seconds, the place almost looks beautiful. Then someone gets shoved and you're snapped back. It's that tension between this could be peaceful and it absolutely is not that the cinematography leans into. Acting-wise, the cast carries a lot of the heavy lifting. The young inmate's performance is full of these micro-shifts. Shoulders too tense at first, eyes darting, voice breaking when he tries to sound tough. Over time, you see his whole physicality change. He walks differently. His gaze hardens. But what's clever is that the fear never fully leaves his eyes. It just gets buried under layers of learned responses. The older prisoner does almost the opposite. He starts out as this solid, unshakable presence. And as the conspiracy stuff starts to surface, you see little cracks form. He hesitates. He gets quieter after certain conversations. When he smiles, it doesn't reach his eyes the way it did earlier. It's a subtle erosion of someone who thought his soul was fireproof. The guards too, at least a few of them, are played with a kind of grounded manners. There's this one who barely raises his voice, but somehow makes every line sound like a threat. He has this habit of leaning just a little too close, invading inmates' space while speaking almost politely. The performance nails that horrible politeness of institutional cruelty. I'm just doing my job, but I'm going to enjoy every second that hurts you. You buy that these are the guys who would look the other way when something illegal is happening in the next room, or even participate, because the system constantly rewards them for it. Now, about those illegal experiments and the conspiracy angle, this is where I know some viewers are going to divide. Prison dramas are usually pretty grounded, and you start throwing in secret tests and shady medical procedures, it can feel like it's veering into genre territory. Personally, I think it works here more than I expected. They don't suddenly turn the show into a sci-fi thriller. It's more like a grotesque extension of prison reality. Inmates being treated as less than human, as bodies and data points instead of people. The details stay muddy enough that your imagination does a lot of the worst work, which is smart. There's a stretch around the middle where one of the inmates comes back from a checkup different. Not brainwashed zombie different, nothing that dramatic. Just dulled. He's jumpier around certain sounds, he stares into space longer, he forgets tiny things about his own life that he never would have forgotten before. The conspiracy isn't they built a mad science lab under the prison. It's more someone figured out no one cares what happens to these men, so they're using them. It fits with the show's core idea. If the world has decided you don't matter, what horrors does that open the door to? Where I might be in the minority is this. I actually liked that the show didn't spell every detail out, even when it came to the experiments. I've seen people want a clearer explanation. A concrete villain with a monologue where he lays out the program and its purpose. And I get that impulse. Mystery can be frustrating when you're deeply invested. But for me, the vagueness felt more honest. Institutions that abuse power rarely send out memos explaining themselves. The inmates only ever get fragments, rumors, physical scars, missing time. So that's the experience we share as viewers. In a weird way, the lack of a clean answer becomes its own indictment. The system is so big and opaque that even the people trapped inside it never fully know what's happening to them. One of the most effective things the show does is explore how these men carve out little pockets of humanity inside all that horror. It's not just about escape plans and surviving beatings. It's also about jokes traded under breath, little rituals, makeshift families. There's a scene with a group of inmates crowded around a table, technically playing cards, but really just telling stories about food they miss. The way their eyes light up talking about the crunch of fried chicken or the smell of fresh bread. It's funny at first, then quietly devastating when you realize this is a full-blown coping mechanism. They're building a communal fantasy buffet just to make the watery stew in front of them bearable. And it's not all soft, inspirational stuff either. Some of the friendships are born out of sheer survival math. I stand next to you because people are less likely to stab me if they're afraid of you. The show is honest about that. There's affection, sure, but there's also resentment. One guy might hate how dependent he is on another or secretly judge him for something he did to get by. Loyalty and contempt live side by side in these small cells. I really appreciated that the series sits with that contradiction instead of forcing everyone into tidy roles like the loyal friend or the traitor. People bounce between those poles. The young inmate's arc is really about learning what loyalty even means in this place. Early on, he thinks of it in simple terms. I stand by my friends. I don't snitch. But the more entangled he gets with the gangs, the more that definition breaks apart. There are several moments where telling the truth could save someone's life, but only if he betrays someone else. Staying silent might protect one person and doom another. The show keeps putting him in these impossible positions and then doesn't let him escape the emotional fallout. He doesn't get to walk away clean. He has to live with the knowledge that any choice he makes costs someone something. On a personal note, there was one dynamic that hit me harder than I expected. There's this almost father-son tension that develops between the young inmate and the older prisoner, and the show mines it for all kinds of uncomfortable emotion. The older guy sees bits of his younger self in this kid and tries, in his own gruff way, to steer him clear of certain mistakes. But he's not a perfect mentor. He's still an inmate with his own grudges and blind spots. So sometimes his guidance is more about protecting his own fragile hope than what's actually best for the kid. And as someone who's had that experience of realizing an adult you relied on was human and broken and winging it the whole time, yeah, some of those scenes stung. There's one quiet exchange where the kid basically asks him straight up, "Do you think I deserve to be here?" A more sentimental show would give you a comforting answer, a speech about redemption. Here, the older man pauses for a long moment and then redirects the question. Does it matter? He's not dodging out of laziness. He's challenging the whole logic of the place. The way the actor delivers that, half bitter, half weary, tells you this is a guy who has spent years tearing himself apart with that same question and finally realized it never changed anything. That line lives rent-free in my brain. From a structural standpoint, I like how the series threads the escape planning through the personal drama without letting it take completely over. It's always there. Someone's counting steps from the cell to the yard. Another is watching guard rotations. Somebody else is smuggling in tools or information. But it's messy. People flake. Plans get scrapped. New obstacles appear. You never get that clean heist planning montage where everything is explained and diagrammed. Instead, pieces come together and fall apart over multiple episodes, mirroring how fragile any hope of escape would actually be. The editing reflects that too. Scenes don't always cut at the moment you expect. Sometimes we leave a conversation in the middle of a sentence and pick it up an episode later in a different emotional context. It's jarring at first, but it fits the fragmented lives these guys led. Time is broken up by roll calls, lockdowns, random searches. Life gets interrupted constantly. The show lets the form mimic that, so you start to feel a bit disoriented in a way that's intentional, not sloppy. Every once in a while, though, you get this perfectly self-contained mini-movie of a scene. One in particular, in the showers, is just masterfully done. No, not like that. Stay with me. A fight is clearly about to break out. You feel it long before the first punch. The tile walls are so bright, they're almost blinding. Steam is hanging in the air, and the camera moves slow, almost dreamy, past faces that are all trying really hard to look indifferent. Then the silence gets punctured by a bar of soap dropping and skittering across the wet floor, and that tiny sound is like a trigger. Everything explodes. The sound gets muddy, grunts, water pounding, metal clanging somewhere, and the camera starts cutting faster, closer, more chaotic. But then, right in the middle of it, they cut to an overhead shot. For a second, everyone looks small, like ants slipping on a white plate. It's brutal, but it's also a reminder to the people in charge, this is just another mess to be hosed down. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The experiments and conspiracies aren't just there to add spice to the violence. They become this metaphor for how the prison, and by extension the broader system, sees these men as raw material. Their bodies, their pain, their memories, everything is extractable, modifiable, disposable. The show doesn't go on long abstract monologues about it. It just quietly keeps showing you people in power making choices that treat inmates as less than human. A guard looking away. A warden signing a form without reading it. A doctor ignoring a plea. All these tiny, horrifying nods. The music helps a lot with that atmosphere. The score stays relatively minimal. It's not wall-to-wall. When it kicks in, it's more tense drones, low percussion, these nervy strings that never quite resolve. There are a few moments where the music almost sounds like it's about to become uplifting, like in a scene where the inmates share a rare laugh or moment of solidarity, and then a single dissonant note will sneak in and soar it. You get trained not to fully trust any hopeful swell in the soundtrack, which is exactly how the characters feel about any good moment they get, waiting for the other shoe to drop. You can also feel the series trying to walk this tightrope between portraying the inmates as victims of a brutal system and not erasing the harm they've done. They mention crimes, but they don't fetishize them. You get bits and pieces from backstories, and some of them are ugly. The show doesn't go, actually, everyone here is secretly a good person. What it does is more complicated. People who have done terrible things are still people. What do we do with that? That's not a question with an easy answer. And the show seems less interested in answering it cleanly than in making sure you keep asking it. We also get to see hints of the world outside, mostly through visiting rooms, snippets of phone calls, or letters. Those scenes are heartbreaking because they're almost always slightly off. Time moved on out there, but in here, every day is kind of the same. So you'll have a man talking to his son who's grown taller, deeper voice, starting to pull away. And the dad is still stuck on stories from when the kid was 5. Or an ex-partner who clearly wants to move on but is torn up by guilt. The actors in those outside roles nail that strange blend of love, resentment, and exhaustion that comes with having your life orbit someone who's physically gone but emotionally still present. What really got under my skin is how No Cage Can Hold keeps hammering on this idea that hope is both necessary and dangerous. You need it to survive. It's the thing that keeps you from just dissolving into the routine. But hope also gets people hurt. People who believe they can expose the conspiracy or make a run for it or change the guard's mind. Those are often the ones who pay the highest price. The show doesn't resolve that tension in a feel-good way. It just keeps showing you men walking that tightrope every day, deciding how much of themselves they're willing to risk for the chance of something better. And it's around the point where the experiments and the escape plans start to cross that the series really tightens the screws. The conspiracy isn't just background noise anymore. It directly shapes who might get out and who absolutely won't be allowed to. That's where trust becomes almost a luxury. When everyone knows there's something bigger and uglier happening behind the scenes, suddenly every alliance feels shakier. Is the guy standing next to you at count time a partner in your escape or someone keeping tabs on you for something else? The show milks that paranoia without turning everyone into caricatured backstabbers, which is a hard balance to strike. And that's probably a good place to pause on the big picture setup, because where the show really starts to sing is in how those pressures reshape each individual relationship and how the visual language tightens as we move deeper into the prison's darkest corners. One of the most gripping things, to me, is watching how the relationships twist as the situation inside keeps getting worse. At the start, alliances are pretty straightforward. You stick with people from your old neighborhood, your old crew, your background. Simple tribal lines. But as more of the illegal experiment stuff creeps toward the surface and the escape schemes go from daydreams to actual logistics, the lines blur. You'll see two guys who barely spoke suddenly sharing information in a corner, eyes flicking to the security cameras every few seconds. Meanwhile, best friends start holding back tiny pieces of truth from each other. Not in some melodramatic way, but in those of beats in a conversation where you see someone choose silence instead of honesty. The show is clever about how it frames those little betrayals. They're rarely huge, operatic moments. It's more like someone promises to pass a message along and then forgets. Someone nods along with a plan they don't believe in because admitting doubt would mean losing protection. You see hesitation written across faces, even as mouths say, "Yeah, I got you." Those are the scenes that really sting because they feel deeply human. Most of us don't blow up our relationships with some enormous act, we corrode them in tiny ways. Multiply that by the life-ordered stakes of the prison, and you've got dynamite. You can feel the directors playing with physical distance as a way of charting those shifts. Early on, there's a shot of the young inmate and the older prisoner sitting on opposite bunks, basically two corners of the room, like they're sharing a space but not a life. As their bond grows, the blocking changes. They end up standing closer during arguments, sitting on the same side of the table in the visiting room, taking up slightly more of the frame together than they used to. Later, when secrets around the experiments and escape plans start tangling them up, that distance creeps back in. The same cell suddenly feels bigger because of how far apart they choose to stand. The space between two bodies becomes its own character. One scene in particular nails that shift. They're in the yard, walking in slow circles, because that's the only way to steal a semi-private conversation. No grand gestures, just footsteps on gravel. The kid's pushing for details about a potential way out. The older man is evasive in this calm, almost patronizing way, like he's trying to protect him, but also trying to protect something he's building behind the scenes. The camera sits behind them for a while, letting us see the muscle twitch in the older guy's jaw as he lies. Because he is lying. You can feel it. Then it cuts around front, and suddenly there's this massive, empty stretch of yard between them, even though they're walking right next to each other. That's not realism, that's emotional geography. You start noticing how often the show uses reflections and shadows once the conspiracy story heats up. Faces half in light and half in darkness, conversations held where we only see silhouettes through frosted glass doors, an inmate's reflection on a polished table that doesn't quite line up with his actual expression. It's not subtle, but it doesn't feel overbearing either. It's more like the series leaning into its own paranoia. Can you really trust what you think you're seeing in here? And more importantly, can you trust yourself? What deepens all of that is how much the staff is folded into the drama, not as an abstract threat, but as people who also live inside this ecosystem every day. Toward the middle section, we start getting more time with a couple of the guards, and that's where the moral sludge thickens. One of them, the "I'm just here for a paycheck" type, gets pulled into the illegal operation in a classic way. Small favors at first. Sign this paper without reading it. Turn off that camera for 5 minutes. Escort this inmate alone. Each step is framed as minor, and each time he tells himself he had no choice. But you watch the progression in his body language. First he's nervous, then ashamed, then numb. That numbness is scarier than his fear ever was. I actually appreciated that the show never asks us to fully redeem him. It offers glimpses of conscience, him flinching at the sight of a particularly bad beating, or lingering outside the infirmary door when he knows something's happening that shouldn't. You see the impulse to open the door battling with the certainty that if he does, the machine will eat him too. But we don't get the Hollywood moment where he blows the whistle and saves the day. He stays what he is, a man who let himself be turned into a cog because he convinced himself there was no alternative. That's nastier to sit with than a clean redemption arc, but it feels truer. Around this point, the series starts flirting with the idea that the prison itself may not be the only cage. The outside world, when we glimpse it, is hardly some just paradise those men were ripped away from. You hear about budget cuts, about private contracts, about quotas that need filling. A lawyer mentions that certain behavioral programs bring in extra funding, and that line lands like a punch when you already know there are secret experiments happening. The bureaucracy that's supposed to regulate all of this looks less like a shield and more like camouflage. The rot doesn't start at the prison walls. It seeps in from way above. If you're watching this as a newcomer who's mostly just curious about whether the show delivers on suspense and drama, the answer is yes. But what surprised me was how much of the suspense is emotional rather than purely physical. Will they escape? Sure, that question drives the plot. Yet I found myself more wound up over, will this character finally confess what he did? Or is this friendship going to survive what they're about to put it through? Late in the season, a character spills a secret about their role in another inmate's suffering, and there's no violence in the scene at all. Just two men, four walls, and a truth coming out. I was more tense during that confession than during some of the actual fights. Let me talk about one of those confessions for a second, because it's one of the best examples of how the show uses performance and space. We are in a tiny interview room, fluorescent lights buzzing like lazy hornets overhead, to chairs bolted to the floor. One of those metal tables that looks like it's been wiped down 1,000 times and is still never clean. The older prisoner sits opposite a man who used to be his friend, though at this point, friend feels like a generous word. We know there's unfinished business between them. What we don't know is the specifics. The conversation starts mundane, legal talk, appeals, how you holding up. After a while, the background noise seems to recede. You stop hearing the guards' footsteps outside or the occasional shout from down the hallway. It's just their voices and the clicking of the older man's thumbnail against the table as he steels himself. Then he drops it. The detail he's been hiding all season. How he lied years ago. How he benefited from that lie. How that lie is the reason the other man is still inside. The camera doesn't cut away. We sit on the listener's face and watch the betrayal seep in, like ink spreading through water. No screaming, no dramatic outburst. Just this subtle crumple around the eyes and mouth. It's devastating. That scene is where the whole loyalty versus survival theme gets teeth. The show's been telling us all along that choices inside carry enormous weight. But here you see the long tail of those choices. A decision made in fear years ago cascades into a life stolen. And the confession isn't magically redemptive either. You see the guilt lift of the older prisoner's shoulders just a hair. But it doesn't free him, it just forces him to live honestly with the harm he's done. Meanwhile, the man hearing it doesn't forgive him. Why should he? Yet he doesn't explode either. It's like the prison has trained him to absorb even this level of betrayal as one more unchangeable fact of his reality. If you're wondering whether the conspiracy and the science-wise stuff ever overwhelms that human core, for me, it doesn't. There are definitely moments where the show leans into that thriller energy, shadowy labs glimpsed through half-open doors, files being quietly shredded, that kind of thing. But those scenes always circle back to a face, to someone's body paying the price. It's not about the evil experiment in a vacuum. It's what does it look like when a man realizes his nightmares might not just be trauma but side effects of something done to him? His hands tremble, his sense of self rattles. That's what sticks. One of the standout sequences that blends the two threads is this mid-season lockdown. An incident happens. No one's fully sure what, we just see flickers. A stretcher rolled past, a smear of blood on a wall that gets hosed down way too quickly. The administration responds by sealing everything off. Lights always on. Movement restricted. Extra medical checks ordered. The regular brutal rhythm of prison life gets replaced by this unnatural stillness, and the experiments ramp up under cover of that emergency. We follow the young inmate through that lockdown, and it feels like wandering through someone's fever dream. Days blur, time loses meaning, he starts noticing patterns, which sells the infirmary team visits, who comes back from those visits groggy or different, who doesn't come back at all. The visuals get more fragmented, quick cuts to blank walls, to the tiny slot in the door, to the same guard's face appearing over and over like a recurring nightmare. At one point, in the middle of a sleepless night under fluorescent lights, he scribbles a tally of those taken and returned on the side of his bunk, as if counting them will make any of it make sense. What really twisted the knife in that arc for me is that the lockdown also breeds some of the strongest moments of intimacy. When you can't move, all you have left is talking. Whispers through vents, knuckles tapping codes against the walls, guys sharing the most random, tender details about their outside lives because they're half convinced they'll be dragged off next. One inmate describes the way his daughter used to mispronounce the word spaghetti, and he laughs. And then the laugh breaks into a sob, and he stifles it with his forearm because crying too loud could draw attention. That mix of affection and terror is the heartbeat of the show. This might sound odd, but one of the things I admired is how unglamorous the escape planning is. A lot of prison dramas treat the escape like this elegant, Rube Goldberg machine, one master plan, meticulously executed. No Cage can hold treats it more like trying to build a parachute out of garbage while falling from a plane. A possible path opens up because of a broken lock or a distracted guard, and just as quickly, that path closes when a new warden arrives or a schedule changes. You see the guys constantly adjusting, fighting despair every time months of preparation go up in smoke with a single policy shift. There's a quietly brutal scene where the older prisoner and a few others have been working on a tunnel scheme. Again, the show wisely doesn't go into cartoonish, dig behind the poster territory. It keeps it grimy, limited, plausible. They've been chipping away at a particular weak spot, trading favors for tools, timing out guard rotations. After weeks of effort, they're ready to test a small section. And just as they're about to, sirens blare, a shakedown, new orders from above. Suddenly the whole wing is being moved to a different block permanently. All that work? Buried. The look on the older man's face as he realizes it was all for nothing, shoulder slumping just an inch, jaw tightening, eyes going flat for a second. That's the kind of moment that makes you feel how insane it is that anyone ever keeps going. Here's where I'll throw out another take that might rub some people the wrong way. I actually like the slower, talk-heavy episodes more than the big action ones. I've seen some complaints that the mid-season loses momentum because it isn't all riots and brawls. For me, those so-called slower hours are where the show finds its soul. Watching a character quietly barter away the last memento from his old life in exchange for a shot at protection tells me more about him than any fight sequence ever could. When someone decides to give up their spot in an escape plan to save another inmate, you don't need a chase scene to feel the stakes. The action matters, sure, but it's the moral choke points that had me clenching my jaw. Speaking of moral choke points, the young inmate's journey from naive arrival to reluctantly hardened operator is paced carefully enough that you almost don't notice the transformation until the show smacks you with it. Early on, he's constantly asking, why doesn't someone do something? That question powers a lot of his anger. As he gets more entangled in the conspiracy and the violence, the question shifts, almost without him realizing it, into what am I willing to do? Once that shift happens, small decisions that would have horrified him in episode 1 become thinkable. There's a scene later on where he has to pressure another inmate into keeping quiet about something he saw, something tied to the experiments. The kid we met at the beginning would have been the one needing protection from that kind of pressure. Now he's the one applying it. And the show doesn't present it as a triumphant, he's finally learning to survive. It's painful to watch. You see his face twist as he says things he knows are wrong, but also believes are necessary. He's both disgusted with himself and clinging to the logic that this is the only way to keep the bigger plan alive. That duality, that self-disgust mixed with cold resolve, is where the performance really shines. One of the most haunting little details. And this is something you might miss if you're not looking for it, is how his language changes. Early episodes. I don't belong here. This place is crazy. They can't do that. There's still an us versus them feeling where them is the institution, and he's an outsider thrown into it. Later, you hear him use phrases like, "We run this block," or "This is how we do it." He starts saying "we" about the very system that's destroying him. On one level, it's just him learning the social structure. On another, it's the prison swallowing chunks of his identity. The show's visual style evolves right alongside that. At the beginning, the camera often takes the kid's perspective, moving a lot, peering around corners, handheld jitters that scream fish out of water. By the time he's integrated into the power grid of the prison, the camera settles more. You get more static shots of him holding court at a table or leaning against a wall while others come to him. The frame treats him as part of the architecture now. That's not accidental. It's storytellers using the lens to say, he's no longer just moving through the cage. He's become one of its bars. And then you have the other men who refuse that absorption, each in their own way. One guy leans hard into faith, leading quiet prayer circles, writing letters he knows may never be sent. Another throws himself into legal work, becoming the resident jailhouse lawyer who helps others file appeals and grievances. A third basically turns inward, building a mental world so rich he can vanish into it for hours. The show is honest about the costs of each strategy. Faith may not save anybody from a nightstick. Legal work can be sabotaged with a single missing file. Escapist fantasy walks the line with disassociation. But watching them cling to those strategies, you understand that resistance doesn't always look like punching a guard. Sometimes it's just refusing to let the place dictate what you think about when you close your eyes. At a certain point, the experiments stop being a shadow and start touching the core cast directly. Without getting too specific, because I do want to leave some of the twists for you to experience, there's a stretch where one of the central characters gets pulled into that program. He goes missing for a while. Rumors fly. When he comes back, he's not some horror movie version of himself. But there are differences. He flinches at sudden noises that never used to bother him. His sleep is worse. Memories come in jagged flashes. There's this heartbreaking moment when someone asks him about a shared incident, and he can't remember it clearly. He remembers the outline, but not the emotional core, like someone erased his connection to his own past. That, quietly, is one of the scariest ideas the show plays with. What if the worst thing they can take from you isn't your freedom or your body, but your story? If you can't trust your memories, how do you stay you? And if you're a man whose entire persona inside that prison is built on stories of what you did, what you survived, what you'll do next, what does it mean when those become unreliable? The scenes of him wrestling with that are shot almost like horror. Mirrors he avoids, hands he stares at as if they might not be his. The sound design adds little distant echoes of earlier dialogue, like snippets of his own past rattling around just out of reach. I need to admit something here on a personal level. This show hit me hardest in those quiet identity erosion moments. I've never been in a prison, but that fear of losing yourself to an environment, of slowly becoming someone you don't recognize just to cope, that's real. It's the same little voice that whispers when you're stuck in a toxic job or a bad relationship. If I keep compromising, who am I going to be by the end of this? No cage can hold just cranks that fear up to maximum volume and wraps it in razor wire. And yet, it isn't a despair porn spiral. The writers keep throwing in these tiny, defined acts of humanity that feel almost obscene against the backdrop of cruelty. An inmate braiding another's hair, because you'll feel better if you don't look like a mess. Someone taking the blame for a minor infraction, so a guy with an upcoming parole hearing doesn't get dinged. A guard, clearly at risk of getting caught, slipping an extra apple into a lunch tray with this blink and you miss it motion. None of those acts fix the system. They don't even shift the scales noticeably. But together, they create this mosaic of "we are still here." and we are still people. It helps that the show isn't afraid to let the men be funny. Not sitcom funny, but that very specific, dark, coping humor that flourishes in miserable conditions. There's a running bit about one inmate who insists he's going to write a cookbook based entirely on prison recipes, ramen lasagna, instant coffee desserts, the whole tragic mess. Every time he describes a new dish, the others groan and then immediately start arguing about the best seasoning packets. It's silly, but it's also grounding. Laughter in that environment is an act of rebellion. And for us as viewers, it keeps the show from sinking into a monotone of suffering. As we move into the later episodes, the pressure cooker really starts to scream. The experiments are more brazen, the administration more ruthless, and the escape plan, such as it is, faces its most serious test. This is where the series could have easily tipped into cliché with a big, glorious breakout or a hopeless massacre. Instead, it threads this weirdly mature middle path where victory and failure get muddied. Some parts of the plan work, others fall apart. Some people get what they wanted at enormous cost. Others lose almost everything but keep a shard of themselves intact. What I find impressive is how the show maintains its visual and emotional discipline through all that chaos. The cinematography doesn't suddenly become glossy just because events are ramping up. If anything, it gets grimmer. Harsher contrasts, tighter framing, faces half obscured by bars, literal and metaphorical. At one point, a scene that could have been shot as a full-blown action sequence, a chaotic scramble down a dark corridor, is instead framed almost entirely in close-ups of hands and feet. You barely see who's where. All you feel is fear and motion. That choice keeps you locked to the subjectivity of the characters instead of pulling back into a cool, omniscient vantage point. We also get more direct collisions between the conspirators behind the experiments and the inmates who have been their unwilling subjects. Again, the show resists the urge to give us a cartoon villain with a monologue. The brain behind the program, when we finally meet them face to face in a significant way, is disturbingly bland. Nice suit, calm voice, that hollow corporate empathy. They talk about data sets and outcomes and efficiencies, and you realize their evil isn't born just from malice. It's born from indifference sharpened into policy. They don't hate these men, they've simply stopped thinking of them as men. They're a chilling exchange where one inmate spits, "We're human beings," and the administrator replies, almost offended, "Nobody's saying you're not." The way it's delivered, it's clear this person genuinely believes that. They've constructed an entire mental universe where their work is necessary, maybe even benevolent in some twisted way. That's the horror. Not a cackling villain, but someone who sleeps fine at night because the paperwork is in order. As all of this is crashing together, the friendships under strain, the experiments weaponized, the hope of escape flickering, you start seeing the theme of redemption come into sharper focus. Not redemption in the sense of this man did a bad thing, now he does a good thing, balance restored. Redemption here is messy, partial, sometimes entirely internal. A guy who's done unforgivable things might still choose, in one crucial moment, to absorb a blow meant for someone else. Does that erase his past? No, but it matters in that moment to the person he saves. The show seems to argue that redemption, if it exists at all, is something that happens in specific moments between people, not as a cosmic scoreboard. At the same time, it never lets us forget the question of justice. There are men in this prison who probably should not be walking free for the safety of others. And there are men clearly railroaded by a racist, classist system. Throw them all into the same brutal machine, and you end up with this moral landfill where it's impossible to sort cleanly between deserving and undeserving suffering. That discomfort is baked into the show's DNA. It doesn't let you sit comfortably on any side, release them all, or lock them up and throw away the key, without showing you the human cost of those easy slogans. As a drama, No Cage Can Hold is doing something really delicate. It's trying to tell a gripping sometimes pulpy story about conspiracies and escapes, while also dragging your face across the concrete of real-world incarceration issues. And most of the time, it pulls that off. When it stumbles, for me, is in a few late-game coincidences that feel a bit too convenient. For example, someone just happening to overhear a key piece of information at the precise moment they needed it. Those moments stand out because so much of the rest of the show is about plans failing, information being incomplete, everything being messier than anyone wants it to be. But even there, the performances do a lot to sell it. An actor can take a slightly contrived story beat and ground it with the right reaction. A long pause, an incredulous look, a bitter laugh that says, "I can't believe we're doing this, but what choice do I have?" And to the show's credit, it usually follows those breaks of luck with a slap of consequence. You might get a lucky break in one scene only to have it blow up in your face 2 episodes later in a completely different way. Nothing comes free. By the time we head into the final stretch, you watched these characters be broken down, rearranged, forced to choose between different versions of themselves. The prison hasn't just contained them, it's rewritten them. The question hanging in the air isn't just who will get out, but after all this, who would they even be on the other side of those walls? And that question, more than any specific plot twist, is what kept me pinned to the screen. And from here, the series starts to cash in on all the slow-burn work it's done with its relationships and themes, steering everything toward a final run that's less about a single event and more about a cascade of reckonings for the inmates, the guards, and the rotten structure hemming them all in. What I love about that final run is that the show doesn't suddenly pretend all these people are different than who we've been watching for hours. The cascade of reckonings isn't magic. It's just everyone finally being cornered by the consequences they've been dodging. The young inmate has to face what kind of man he's let this place turn him into. The older prisoner has to look straight at the cost of all the compromises he called survival. The "just doing my job" guard has to stop pretending he doesn't know exactly what he's part of. Nobody gets to hide behind their favorite excuse anymore. There's a late yard scene that really crystallized that. It's not the big riot, not the big escape beat, nothing that would make the trailer. It's literally just count time. Everyone lined up, the usual shouted numbers, the guard droning through his list. But the camera is moving differently now. It glides down the line of faces we know, each one holding a different storm inside. Fear, resentment, secret hope. When the guard gets to the older prisoner's name, there's a fractional hitch in his voice. Just a stutter, a sliver of recognition that this isn't just a number on a clipboard anymore. The older man looks up, meets his eye. That's it. No speech, no outburst. Just two people who have spent the entire show pretending they don't see each other finally, dropping the act for half a second. That moment lands because the show has spent so much time making the routine feel numbing. We've seen count after count. This one feels different. The rhythm is off. The air feels thick. Even the extras in the background seem to be holding their breath. It's like the prison itself knows something's about to snap. And as a viewer, you're leaning in, not because you expect a bomb to go off, but because you know this simple little gaze is going to echo into what's coming next. That's the kind of tension you can't fake with just noise and blood. A lot of the final episodes happen in that weird emotional space where hope and dread are sitting at the same table. There are tangible steps toward a potential way out, legal angels, physical routes, leverage on the people running the experiments. But every gain is matched by a new risk. A guard transferred, an informant exposed, a camera that was broken last week mysteriously fixed. The show does this almost cruel thing where it keeps giving you glimpses of a path and then sliding a brick in front of it. It's infuriating, and also exactly what getting free from a system like this would feel like. One of the bold moves they make is structuring one of the final episodes around a day that, for most of the people inside, looks totally ordinary. Breakfast, yard, work duty, showers, lights out. But the camera keeps finding the pockets where the extraordinary is happening in secret. A folded note slipped under a tray. A coded sentence in a conversation about sports. Someone palming a key card they're absolutely not supposed to have. The music stays almost too calm, like your nerves are lying to you, and you're screaming at the screen, "No, this matters. Pay attention." It's a great reminder that revolutions don't always look dramatic. They look like 1,000 tiny choices layered on top of each other. The show also takes advantage of the fact that by now, we know these sets by heart. We know the angels of the corridors, the sound of certain doors, the way light falls in the chapel versus the cafeteria. So when they change something in those spaces, you feel it. A door that's always shut is open. A light that flickers on and off suddenly burns steady. A guard who never smiles is smirking. The geography itself becomes part of the storytelling. You start spotting tells before the characters do, which is such a satisfying place to be with a show. You're not ahead of the story, you're just tuned into its language. And speaking of the chapel, I have to talk about one of the most widely explosive scenes in the whole series. It's late, the place is almost empty. Just a few candles lit, casting those long, shaky shadows up the peeling walls. The young inmate has asked to meet the older prisoner there, which in itself tells you something. This is not a casual meet me by the laundry room conversation. They sit in the front row, no one else in sight. And for the first time in a long time, the kid doesn't try to sound tough. He basically lays out his terror in raw, unpolished words. What if the escape plan fails? What if the experiments have already changed him? What if this is all he ever is? The older man listens, really listens, and you can see the conflict tearing at him. Because he knows more than he's been saying. He knows certain details about the experiments, about how the administration has been tracking particular inmates. He could lie again, give the kid some comforting half-truth, keep him docile and useful. But after everything we've seen in their dynamic, that's no longer a free move. It would be another small betrayal in a whole chain of them. The camera pushes in, the candles flicker, and in the tiniest voice crack you hear this man make a choice. He tells the truth. Not all of it. He's too damaged and pragmatic to suddenly become a saint, but enough to shatter the kid's last illusions. What follows isn't a big melodramatic blow-up. It's wars. The kid just goes quiet. That hopeful, stubborn spark we've seen in his eyes all season dims for a moment. And you feel this sick drop in your stomach like, oh, this might break him. I actually caught myself muttering at the screen, "Don't do that to him." Which, if you've ever watched TV with me, is when I know the show has me by the throat. And the score barely rises above a whisper there. Just a low, trembling note that hangs between them, like both of their hearts are vibrating off key. Around the same time, the guard who's been our window into the staff side gets his own sort of anti-redemption arc. He's given an opportunity to take a stand. Not some grand, world-altering stand, just a choice not to sign a particular document that would greenlight an especially nasty phase of the experiment program. For a second, you see the version of him who walks away. He stares at the page, dead silent, pen hovering. You can almost hear his inner monologue. If I say no now, maybe this stops. Maybe I can live with myself again. Then the supervisor coughs, impatient. The moment passes. He signs. It's devastating in its smallness. There's no triumphant music, no slow motion. Just ink on paper and a man closing a door on his own conscience. That's one of the show's more vicious truths. Most evil doesn't look like snarling monsters. It looks like tired people who know better going along with something because it's easier in the moment. There's a version of this series where that guard slowly grows a spine and turns into a hero. No cage can hold glances at that version. Then walks the more uncomfortable path. He stays who he is. Complicit, cowardly, human in the worst way. And for me, that's scarier than any overtly sadistic villain. The experiment's storyline also peaks here in a way that reframes the whole prison. Up until now, we've been thinking of the illegal program as something happening under the institution, like a secret layer. The final stretch starts to suggest it's not some aberration. It's the logical extension of how the place already operates. If you have a system designed to dehumanize, to strip people of agency, it's not a huge leap for someone to decide those people are ripe for research. The show never quite pounds the table and shouts that point. But you feel it when you see the same corridors used for everyday transfers now repurposed to shuttle men to the testing rooms. There's no visual difference. That's the horror. There's one sequence, I'll keep this broad to spare the big spoilers, when an inmate we love is taken for what's clearly meant to be a one-way trip. The way they shoot it is chillingly mundane. No dramatic escort. No ominous music cue. Just him being told to step out, hands cuffed, walking a hallway he's walked 100 times. The sound design, though, goes wild. Every clink of the handcuffs, every creak of his shoes on the floor, every hum of the lights above is cranked up just a notch, like his senses are on overload. We cut between his point of view and the faces of the men watching him go, and it's this tidal wave of helplessness. Nobody can step in. Nobody can even say goodbye without putting a target on their own backs. I'll be honest, that scene wrecked me way more than any of the more obviously brutal stuff, because it plays on that nightmare feeling of being led somewhere you can't return from and having to act like it's just another Tuesday. And it's also the moment when you realize the escape plan isn't just about busting out of a building. It's about outrunning a timeline. They're not just trying to get free someday. They're trying to get free before they're erased. Amid all that dread, the show still finds room to depaint some of the smaller, quieter relationships, which is honestly where its writing really flexes. They're a pair of inmates who have been kind of comic relief until now. Always bickering, always scheming. The guys you cut to after a heavy scene to break the tension. In the final stretch, it becomes clear that one of them has been more involved with the experiments than he ever let on. Not willingly, but as a sort of designated snitch who got pulled into something uglier than he anticipated. When that comes out, the first reaction from his friend isn't anger, it's horror. Not, how could you do this to us? But what did they do to you? They get this jagged little conversation in a laundry room, of all places, half whispered over the roar of machines. One of them holds up a shirt and points out the stains like he's talking about detergent, but they're really talking about guilt. Some things don't wash out, he says. Cliché line on its own, comes out of that actor's mouth with the weight of someone who's tried and failed, and is now realizing he might not get another shot. I didn't expect to be choked up over a secondary friendship, but there I was, staring at a pile of grey uniforms like they were gravestones. In terms of visuals, the final does something I adore. It finally lets the sky into the frame in a way that isn't just daunting. Up to this point, the outdoors have usually been shot either through fences, with bars slicing up the image, or in these compressed, wide lenses that make the yard feel like a cage without a roof. In the last couple episodes, we start getting more low-angle shots of the sky itself. Sometimes it's just clouds sliding past. Sometimes it's that dull pre-dawn blue that feels like the world holding its breath. It's not hopeful in a cheesy way. It's more like the show saying, there's a world beyond these walls, whether or not you get to touch it. There's a gorgeous, brutal little scene where the young inmate is standing in the yard alone, early morning, frost on the concrete. No one else out yet. He tilts his head back and just stares up, eyes half closed, lips parted like the air tastes different out here. The camera slowly rotates from a side profile to a full shot of him silhouetted against this huge expanse of pale sky. And for 3 seconds, if you paused it, you could almost pretend he's free. Then the loudspeaker crackles, a guard barks at him to get moving, and the illusion shatters. That's the show in a nutshell. It will give you that sliver of beauty, but it will not let you forget where you are. Musically, they also cash in on restraint in the end. Because they've held back on big, sweeping themes for so long, the first time a more melodic piece of score creeps in, it hits like a truck. There's a late montage, again, vague here, cutting between different men in different cells, all facing some version of their reckoning. Instead of the usual tense drones, we get the slow, aching motif. A simple piano line, some strings that sound like they're being played with frayed bows. It's not triumphant. It's not tragic. It's tired, but still reaching. You feel how much weight these lives carry, how much they've endured, without the music lecturing you on what to feel. This is also where the show leans hardest into its themes about what freedom actually is. One of the older inmates, the kind of guy who's been there so long the place is basically his whole world, gets a storyline that I found quietly devastating. He's offered a kind of out, not literal release, but a move to a different facility, a lighter environment, away from the experiment nightmare. It's something he should want. On paper, anyone would. And he hesitates, not because he loves this prison, but because he's terrified of who he is without its structure. He knows where he fits here, even if that place is violent and demeaning. The unknown, after decades inside, might be worse. He has this tiny, half-mumbled monologue where he admits he doesn't remember how to cross a street without listening for the guard's orders. It's not played as comic relief, it's heartbreaking. You realize that even a good outcome for some of these men is laced with its own kind of horror. You don't just walk out and resume a past life. You walk out as someone the world doesn't really have a place for anymore. The show doesn't spend a lot of time outside the walls, but those little hints are enough to tell you. The cage goes deeper than concrete and steel. On the flip side, there are characters for whom the idea of freedom remains very literal and immediate. For them, it really is about getting past that final gate, no matter what happens after. The show plays those drives against each other beautifully. In one corner, men thinking long game, worrying about trials, witnesses, systemic exposure. In another, guys for whom tomorrow might as well be science fiction. They want a hole in the fence today. They want the conspirators to bleed now. Watching those priorities crash into each other in the final is like watching tectonic plates grind. Everyone's right from their own vantage point, and everyone is also wrong. I should mention, if you're someone who needs every single plot thread tied off in a neat bow, No Cage Can Hold might frustrate you a bit by the end. It answers the big emotional questions: who these men choose to be, what lines they won't cross, what they're willing to sacrifice. But it leaves some of the mechanics a little blurry. We don't get a detailed court montage tracking every consequence for every corrupt official. We don't get title cards telling us where each inmate ended up 5 years later. The show is more interested in the moment where a man decides whether to pick up the shiv or the phone than in the bureaucratic aftermath of that choice. Personally, I'm okay with that. To me, the emotional clarity matters more than the procedural wrap-up. We may not know the exact fate of every antagonist, but we've seen enough to know the system that allowed all of this to happen is bigger than any one prison. There's a bleak honesty in acknowledging that toppling one warden or exposing one experiment program doesn't suddenly transform the world into a just place. What we do get are images, faces, gestures, small rebellions that linger like ghost lights after the episode ends. One of those images comes in the last few minutes when the older prisoner and the young inmate share what might be their final real conversation. It's not grand. They're not even in some special, symbolically charged location. Just sitting on opposite sides of a table, under that same buzzing fluorescence we've seen a million times. But the way they talk is different. For once, there's no bargaining, no agenda, no veiled threats, no half-truths. The older man finally owns his failures as a mentor, admits where his fear masqueraded as wisdom. The kid, in turn, admits where he chose the easier cruelty instead of the harder compassion. There's a line there that gutted me. The older prisoner says something like, "They built this place to turn us into weapons or ghosts." You don't have to be either. It's such a simple sentence, but you hear the whole show behind it. All the times men have been used or disappeared, all the times the system forced them into those roles. The young inmate doesn't reply with some big speech. He just nods, once, slowly, and you get the sense that whatever happens to him after this that sentence is going to sit in his chest like a hot coal. Maybe that's the point. The show can't free him, but it can give him that. Now, I know some people are going to come out of this show wishing it had gone bigger with a conspiracy fallout, press conferences, national outrage, the whole 9 yards. I'll plant my flag on the opposite hill. I think its refusal to go full hero journalist brings down the system is one of its smart-assed moves. It would have been too easy to let the audience walk away comforted by the idea that exposing one evil program is enough. Instead, No Cage Can Hold leaves you with this gnawing discomfort. For every secret that got dragged into the light here, how many are still buried in other walls, in other institutions, in other corners of the world we'd rather not look at? On a craft level, the final really underscores how well this show has been directed from the jump. The pacing throughout that last run is a tightrope act. Scenes breathe just enough to land emotionally without ever feeling like filler. The editing crosscuts between different plot lines in a way that builds genuine momentum instead of just chopping things up to feel busy. You'll cut from a tense, almost silent stealth moment to a loud, chaotic group scene, and the transition always feels purposeful. Like the show is reminding you, while you focus on one drama, 5 others keep grinding on. The acting stays rock solid too. The young inmate's final stretch is his best work. You believe the weight of every decision on his shoulders, the exhaustion etched into his posture, the flashes of the scared kid he used to be bleeding through at the worst possible times. The older actor, meanwhile, plays his version of worn-out nobility with zero vanity. He doesn't turn his character into a tragic hero. He keeps him a flawed man trying very hard to die just a little bit less compromised than he lived. That humility in the performance makes the moments where he does choose courage feel earned, not melodramatic. Even the smaller performances get nice payoffs. A background guard who used to be a one-note bully gets a single, wordless scene where he hesitates before joining in on a beating, and the camera catches this microscopic war on his face. An inmate who's mostly been comic relief snaps at someone in a moment of fear, and you see the mask crack. Nobody changes completely, but lots of people reveal one more layer of themselves just before the show lets them go. It feels respectful, in a way. Like the writers understood that even side characters carry entire lives we never get to see. If I have a gripe, and this is where I'll probably sound like the annoying cinema nerd at the back of the theater, it's that one late twist leans a hair too close to melodrama compared to the rest of the show's grounded tone. There's a reveal involving who knew about the experiments, and how far up the chain that knowledge went, that's sold with a slightly overcooked confrontation. Raised voices, sweeping statements, a few "you people" lines that feel more like thesis statements than dialogue. It's not terrible, it doesn't break the show, but because everything else has been so textured and specific that one scene feels like the writers grabbing a megaphone. That said, even in that slightly clunky moment, the actors manage to haul a lot of nuance out of the script. The administrator's eyes flickering with genuine offense at being called a monster. The warden's clenched jaw, clearly knowing more than he admits. A secretary in the background who's quietly horrified, realizing she's been complicit by silence. The camera finds those little bits of truth around the edges, even when the center of the scene is a bit on the nose. You can almost feel the director saying, "Okay, we had to get the point across clearly for the folks in the back. Now let's make it human again." By the time the final episode cuts to black, I sat there in that weird post-show limbo where you don't quite want to move. It's not just because of the plot outcomes, who lives, who dies, who gets out, who doesn't. It's because the show has spent so many hours sitting in this particular moral and emotional atmosphere that leaving it feels like stepping out of thick smoke into fresh air. You almost cough. You almost feel guilty for being able to walk away when the characters can't. And that's where No Cage Can Hold really lodged under my skin. It's a story about a prison, sure, but it's also very much about what institutions do to people when nobody's watching, and about the ways people adapt, contort, or break under that pressure. It doesn't let anyone off the hook. Not the system, not the guards, not the inmates, not even us on the couch. Because it keeps forcing you to ask, if I were trapped in there, how long before I started making the kinds of choices I'm judging from the safety of my living room? In terms of sheer entertainment value, if you're into intense, character-driven dramas with a strong sense of place, this is a feast. The suspense isn't constant jump scares. It's that slow, almost suffocating dread that builds when you know hope is dangerous but necessary. The violence, when it comes, is ugly and brief, not stylized. The show respects your intelligence enough to leave some things implied, but it's also not so opaque that you're left confused for the sake of it. It's a muscular piece of TV that trusts its audience. For newcomers who haven't dipped into many prison dramas, I'd say this is a heavy watch, but a rewarding one. It might spoil you a bit, honestly, because of how carefully it balances grit and heart. If you're a fan of this type of setting already, No Cage Can Hold feels like a really confident entry in the genre, familiar in its broad strokes, but distinctive in its focus on experiments, institutional conspiracy, and the slow-burning inner lives of its characters. If you're more of a critic-minded viewer who likes pawing at themes and form, there's a lot here to dig into. The way the show uses repetition to simulate the grind of incarceration, then weaponizes small deviations from that pattern. The way it handles masculinity, not as a monolith of toughness, but as a brittle performance constantly cracking under pressure. The way it threads questions about bodily autonomy and state power through a story that, on the surface, could have just been about gangs and guards. It's thoughtful without being preachy, which is a hard sweet spot to hit. But I don't want to oversell it like it's flawless. If you have a low tolerance for bleakness, this might be a tough sit. The show takes its time. It wants you to feel the days piling up, the weight of institutional cruelty. There are long stretches when nothing big happens except another indignity, another small kindness, another rumor of horror. If you're craving a more propulsive, twist every episode kind of thriller, this could feel slow in places. And the experiment subplot, as restrained as it is, might still be a bit too high concept for viewers who prefer their prison stories strictly grounded in documented realities. On the other hand, if your main question is, does it earn its heaviness? Yeah, I think it does. It's not misery for the sake of misery. Every beating, every lockdown, every betrayal is in service of showing you something about who these men are and what this place is designed to do to them. When the show gives you a moment of grace, a shared laugh, a missed punch, a shaft of sunlight, it feels genuinely precious because you've seen how rare those are. Nothing feels cheap. Personally, I walked away honestly moved. There were at least 3 or 4 scenes where I caught myself sitting closer to the screen than when I'd started the episode, like I was physically trying to get out of my own distance from these people. The late-night conversation about whether they remember their own faces without mirrors. The quiet hand squeeze through the bars as someone's led past. The older prisoner's line about weapons and ghosts. All of that landed in a way that felt less like, wow, great writing, and more like, oof, that hit a bruise I didn't know I had. And I'll confess something slightly embarrassing. There was a point, somewhere in the back half, where I paused an episode to go make tea and just stood in my kitchen for a minute, looking at the window, feeling weirdly guilty for how casually I could walk out my front door. That's not me trying to do a performance of empathy. That's just the honest impact of spending so much time in a story that keeps telling you this cage exists because people who aren't inside decided not to look too closely. The show didn't lecture me into that feeling. It just brought me alongside these men long enough that stepping away felt jarring. So where do I land on No Cage Can Hold overall? I'd say it's a powerful, sometimes punishing, often beautiful drama that takes a familiar premise and pushes it into some bold, unsettling territory. It's anchored by strong performances, rich atmosphere, and a script that's more interested in hard questions than easy catharsis. It stumbles in a couple of spots, an overripe confrontation here, a convenient coincidence there, but not in ways that derail what it's doing. If you're in the mood for something light, or you're easily overwhelmed by stories steeped in systemic injustice, maybe park this one on the someday list. It deserves to be watched when you have the bandwidth to sit with it, not half distracted on your phone. But if you're up for it, if you want to sink into a series that will haunt you a little and maybe make you side-eye the next tough on crime soundbite you hear, then yeah, this is absolutely worth your time. From the flick flare corner of the internet, this one gets a big, considered yes from me. Not an easy yes, not a throw it on for background noise yes. A clear your evening, maybe text a friend after some of the heavier episodes, and let yourself feel it yes. If you do end up watching No Cage Can Hold, I'd genuinely love to hear which moments stuck with you, which characters you found yourself rooting for against your better judgment. And if you want more long-form dives into shows that punch this hard, whether they're prison dramas, sci-fi mind-benders, or messy little character studies, go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss what we do next here. For now, take a breath, unclench your jaw, maybe step outside for some real sky, and I'll see you in the next one. There's one more layer to No Cage Can Hold that I want to peel back, and it sits in the stuff that seems almost throwaway on first watch. The routines, the props, the offhand phrases the guys toss around like they don't matter. Because once you sit with the show for a bit, you realize those little things are doing a ridiculous amount of emotional heavy lifting. The big scenes, the riots, the confrontations, the reveals, hook you in the moment. But it's the coffee cups, the folded notes, the scuffed shoes that warm into your memory afterward. Think about the doors. The show is obsessed with doors. You hear them more than you see them at first. That hydraulic sigh, the metal-on-metal thunk, the rattle as they're tested from the inside. Early episodes treat them like punctuation, slam, cut to black. Later on, the camera starts hanging on them. There's this one shot of a cell door half open, hanging on its hinges during a search, and it just sits there as guards steer through someone's stuff. The inmate is off frame. All you see is this rectangular wound in the wall. You get used to doors meaning separation, denial. No, so on the rare occasion someone opens one for a reason that isn't control. Like a guard quietly letting a man have 5 more minutes on a phone call, you feel it immediately. The sound is the same, but the meaning is different. That's the show, right there. Same mechanisms, different intent. And then there are the nicknames. The prison hands them out like ration slips. Some are funny, some are cruel, some are weirdly tender. At first, they feel like standard issue inmate color, the way any ensemble show gives people shoutable tags. But over time, they start to feel like masks that either protect or suffocate the men wearing them. There's one guy everyone calls Scholar because he's always got his face buried in some beat-up book. That nickname sounds flattering until you realize it's also a cage. The second he tries to step outside the smart guy role, say, by getting involved in the escape planning, nobody takes him seriously. He's the brain, not the muscle. The label they gave him keeps him in his lane. The inverse is true too. One of the more volatile guys has this ugly, aggressive nickname that I won't repeat. And you see him living up to it like it's a full-time job. Any hint of softness, any hesitation, he smothers under that persona because the name says he's the one who swings first. There's this brief scene where he admits under his breath that nobody's called him by his real name in years, and it lands harder than some of the actual beatings. If the state gives you a number and the yard gives you a nickname, where does your actual self live? Not a rhetorical question for these men. What's wild is how much of that is communicated visually instead of hammered out in monologues. The camera will linger for a second on someone hearing their nickname shouted from down the corridor. Watch the flinch, the shoulders go up, the preemptive scowl snap into place. That half second is the whole arc. The tiny moment when they could choose to react differently, then decide, no, this is who I am in here. And here's where it gets sneakily brilliant. The show never draws a neat line between authenticity and performance. Maybe the nickname is just excavating something that was always there. Maybe it's rewriting the person from scratch. You're never fully sure. Food is another big one. The cafeteria scenes could have all blurred together. Grey trays, grey mush, the occasional thrown plate. Instead, the show uses food like a mood ring. On bad days, you see guys shoveling it in mechanically, barely tasting it, just keeping the machine fueled. On less awful days, that same slop becomes currency, bribe, comfort. There's an early episode where the young inmate trades his dessert for a seat at a safe table, and you think, okay, basic social economy. Then later, after he's hardened, you watch him refuse someone else's offer with a smirk. Keep your pudding. It's such a dumb little line, but the contempt in it tells you exactly how far he's traveled from that scared kid who would have given anything just to avoid eating alone. My favorite food moment, though, is this impromptu feast they hold after a particularly hellish week. Nothing special happened in the plot to earn it. The guys just decide, in their own twisted way, that they survived enough to warrant a celebration. They pool stolen packets, trade commissary favors, heat things up on contraband coils. The camera gets almost intimate here. Extreme close-ups of noodles bubbling, sauce mixing, hands bumping into each other around a communal ball. For 5 minutes, the whole show shifts tone. There's real laughter, real banter, that loud, messy joy of people sharing something. And just when you let yourself relax into it, a guard's voice barks from off-screen, and the energy snaps like someone cut a power line. The food is still there. The warmth is still hanging in the air. But the spell is broken. The show gives you the party and the crash in one breath. The friendships ride that same jagged waveform. You get these scenes where two guys are basically an old married couple, griping about each other's habits, borrowing soap, finishing each other's half-told stories. And then you'll turn around and see one of them ducking into a back hallway to quietly pass information to someone else, undermining the very man he just joked with. It's messy. It doesn't line up with neat TV categories like Ride or Die and Snake. The same guy can be both, depending on the day and who's holding the bigger weapon. One of the strongest dynamics outside the central duo involves a gang leader and his right hand. On the surface, it looks like your standard boss-lieutenant relationship. The swaggering short collar and the loyal enforcer who stands half a step behind, arms crossed, scanning for threats. We've seen that in 1,000 crime stories. But no cage can hold keeps slipping real intimacy into their scenes. A hand briefly on a shoulder when nobody's looking. An argument not about power, but about worry. The right hand quietly telling the boss to stop picking fights he doesn't need. Because I don't want to be the last one standing out here. Man, that line hit me sideways. You realize his loyalty isn't fear-based. It's grief avoidance. He's already picturing a version of the future where the person he's orbiting is gone, and he doesn't know who he is without that gravitational pull. So when he does brutal things in the boss's name, yeah, it's about status and survival. But it's also about clinging to the one relationship that, in this warped world, feels consistent. Does that make his violence forgivable? No, but it makes it heartbreakingly legible. And here's where the show zigs instead of zagging. Instead of flipping that into an obvious betrayal arc, the right hand turns on the boss. It lets them stay bound together until circumstances rip them apart. No Shakespearean mutiny. Just the grinding, uncaring gears of the institution putting them in different boxes. One gets transferred. One gets flagged for the experiments. When they have to say goodbye, it's not some big cinematic moment. They barely get a look as one is marched past the other in the hallway. But the look that passes between them is pure, undiluted panic under a thin gloss of toughness. To men who thought they'd figured out at least one constant in their lives suddenly realize, nope, not even that is safe. It's a bold choice not to pay that relationship off with a big showdown, and I actually really respect it. A more obvious version of this show would have them end up on opposite sides of some climactic fight. Instead, No Cage Can Hold is more interested in the ache of unfinished bonds. The question humming in your head afterward isn't who won that power struggle. It's what happens to someone when the only person who understood them in here disappears, and then it leaves you alone with that. Let's talk masculinity for a second, because this show has a lot to say about it without ever dropping a lecture. On the surface, we're in the most stereotypically macho environment you can imagine. A man's max security prison, all posturing and physical dominance and emotional armor. If you only looked at the blocking, who stands tallest, who punches hardest, you'd think it's reinforcing every tough guy trope in the book. But listen to the silences. Watch the scenes at night, after lights out, when voices drop and nobody has to perform for the yard anymore. There's a recurring motif where the guys share stories in the dark like kids at a sleepover, except the stories are about the worst days of their lives. A father admitting he didn't know how to hold his baby the first time. A son confessing he was relieved when his old man went away because it meant the violence in the house stopped. The camera usually sits outside the cells during these chats, looking at bars and concrete instead of faces, and you just hear the words. No one can see anyone else, so the masks slip. It's one of the most honest depictions of how men open up I've seen on TV, not in brightly lit group therapy circles, but sideways, half-jokingly, when everyone can pretend it's no big deal. There's one scene where a guy breaks down for real. Not the controlled, single-tear stuff, but that ugly crying you can't tidy up. He's just gotten bad news from home. The details don't even matter as much as the aftershock. At first, he tries to swallow it. You see him pacing, fists clenching, jaw locked. Then something inside just gives. He slumps down against the cell wall and lets it hit him. Sobs, snort, the whole human mess. The camera doesn't look away. Crucially, neither does his cellmate. The usual TV move here would be for the cameraman to back off, give him privacy. No Cage Can Hold pushes in. The cellmate doesn't crack a joke, doesn't tell him to man up. He just sits nearby and says, quietly, get it out. Bro, we got time. I've watched so many shows where vulnerability is either punished or sentimentalized. This one just lets it exist. This ties into something I think the show does that some viewers might actually undersell. It's quietly radical about the idea of men caring for each other, without it always being through violence or bravado. Yes, there are blood oath promises and all that, but there are also guys remembering each other's allergies, guys saving a spot at the table, guys defending each other in conversations the other never hears. The camera notices every hand on a shoulder, every act of grooming, every gentle shove that is really, I need you to move because something bad is about to go down. You could almost cut a supercut of touches and build a whole emotional map of the season from it. Cinematography-wise, there's a very specific trick they keep using that I didn't fully clock until a rewatch. The double cage frame. You'll get a shot of a man behind bars, and then, between him and the camera, another layer of obstruction, fence, mesh, even out-of-focus guardrails. It's not enough that the characters are trapped. The lens wants you to feel trapped watching them. There's no clean sightline, ever. Even in the few scenes where someone is technically free in their mind, like flashing back to life outside, the show will find something to put between us and them. A clothesline, a car window, half-drawn blinds. It's like the directors are saying, once you're in this story, you don't get an unobstructed view either. Lighting plays its own little symphony. The fluorescents give everything that sickly, greenish cast most of the time, but every so often we get pockets of warmer color that feel almost illicit. The chapel candles, smuggled lighters flaring, sun bouncing off someone's face in the yard. The contrast isn't just pretty, it's thematic. Warmth is always small, fragile, man-made. The cold, institutional light is broad and total. There's a late scene where a power issue kills the overheads, and for a few minutes the only light in the block comes from contraband sources the inmates themselves control. The look of that sequence faces half illumined by orange, moving together in the dark, is one of the rare times the prison feels like a community rather than an open wound. Editing-wise, the show loves an echo. You'll see the same corridor from the same angle a dozen times, but each pass-through means something different. Early on, that corridor is all threat. The new guy being dragged down, the echo of boots behind him. Mid-season, it's routine. Men shuffling to chow, camera barely paying attention. In the final episodes, that hallway becomes a gauntlet. We know what waits at the other end for certain characters. We've seen too many handcuff walks, so every trip down it is loaded with dread. It's just concrete and doors. The only thing that changed is what we've seen there. The show trusts you to remember. There's also a very deliberate use of repetition in dialogue. Little phrases that circle back. You good? We still here. Ain't nothing changing. Said jokingly at first, then bitterly, then with exhausted resignation. The words don't change, but the tone does. And that's the point. It mimics the way people in constrained environments latch onto stock phrases as a kind of shared script. It's easier to recycle lines than to keep inventing new language for the same unchanging reality. And the show sneaks character growth, or decay, into how each man says his lines over time. Has a slightly contrarian angle I haven't really unpacked yet. I actually think the show is at its bravest when it refuses to redeem certain relationships, and that might frustrate people used to more neat emotional arcs. There's a father-son pair, one inside, one visiting, whose storyline feels, at several points, like it's winding up for that big reconciliation moment. You know the one, tears in the visiting room, the kid finally saying, "I forgive you," everyone hugging the glass. No cage can hold nudges toward that, and then walks away. The sun keeps coming, keeps sitting across the table, but you can feel forgiveness curdling into something else. Obligation, curiosity, maybe even pity. The father tries a few times to twist the blame around on his own father, on the system, on the streets, and the kid doesn't buy it. They reach a truce, not a healing. It's quieter. It's more honest. And yeah, it stings that the catharsis never shows up. I can imagine some viewers being like, if you're going to spend that much time on them, pay it off. I get that. But it's also true to life that some wounds don't stitch. They scar, they itch, you learn to move with them. This isn't to say the show is nihilistic. There are reconciliations, there are deep bonds. But it's pretty ruthless about distinguishing between the relationships that can be salvaged and the ones that probably can't. It won't give you healing just because you've earned it as an audience member. On a more personal note, one of the reasons this series stuck to my ribs is how it handles bureaucracy. Not just the flashy cruelty of beatings and solitary, but the slow, paper-thin violence of come back next week. I had a moment one episode where an inmate is begging to see his file, to know what's actually on record about his supposed behavioral problems, and the clerk behind the glass just keeps repeating, "That's not my department," over and over, like a hymn. No raised voice, no direct insult. Just that phrase, again and again, until the man backs away. I've never been in that exact position, but I've had days lost to phone trees and office counters, and I can't help you with that from people who absolutely could have. Watching it turned up to prison stakes intensity made my teeth grind. And that's something I think the show nails that a lot of carceral dramas miss. The unique blend of pettiness and power that defines these spaces. It's not just monsters in uniforms. It's also minimum wage clerks, overworked nurses, bored guards who take a little too much pleasure in saying no, because it's one of the only times all day they get to feel like they matter. The experiments are the high horror, sure, but the everyday indignities are what actually crush these guys. The lost forms, the extended processing times, the medication refills delayed so long they might as well be denied. The show's anger at that stuff is quiet but constant. If you zoom out and look at No Cage Can Hold as a whole, thematically it sits right at the intersection of three big questions. What does punishment actually do? Who gets written off as less than human? And how do people keep any sense of self in a place built to strip it? The illegal experiments are the flashy metaphor for those questions, but you see them echoed in so many smaller choices. Every time a man is called only by his number, every time someone's history gets flattened to one worst act, every time an act of kindness has to be smuggled like contraband, you're watching those questions get chewed on. I keep circling back to that phrase in the title. No cage can hold. On the surface, it sounds defiant. No prison, no bars, no concrete can contain the human spirit, etc. The show plays with that cliché and then quietly turns it on its head. There are bodies that do not get out. There are minds that do not make it. Hope is not invincible here. So what does that line actually mean? By the end, it starts to feel less like you can't keep me in and more like you can't fully control what I mean to myself and to the people who love me. The men might never breathe free air again, but their stories aren't entirely owned by the institutions that hold them. That's a subtler, more bittersweet version of resilience, and I kind of love that the show goes there. So, who is this series actually for? If you're the kind of viewer who needs a lot of moral reassurance, clear good guys, clear bad guys, justice served neatly at the end, you might bounce off this. No Cage Can Hold is allergic to clean lines. It wants you uncomfortable. It wants you empathizing with people you've been told not to empathize with and side-eyeing systems you've been told keep you safe. It's not an easy sell if you show up to TV to decompress. But if you like shows that sit in your bones for a while, that haunt you a little when you're brushing your teeth or scrolling headlines, this is very much in that lane. It's long form in the best way, letting characters evolve in increments so tiny you barely see them until you put episode 1 next to episode 10 and realize, oh, they're not the same person anymore. It gives you room to fall for people, to get frustrated with them, to feel betrayed by them, and then understand them again. The craft, the acting, the camera, the sound backs all of that up instead of fighting it. I honestly think it's a show you shouldn't binge too hard. That sounds weird coming from someone who just did a long-form breakdown of it. But there's a density here that benefits from a little space. An episode a night, maybe. Time to let the themes percolate, to notice the echoes. It's also one of those rare series where watching with someone else, or at least having someone to message about it, really adds to the experience. You're going to want to say, "Did you catch that look?" Or, "I can't believe he did that," and hear someone else's take. If you're sensitive to depictions of abuse, medical violation, or institutional cruelty, you should go in with care. The show doesn't revel in that stuff, but it also doesn't flinch from it. It's not torture porn. It's not trying to shock you every 5 minutes. The worst things tend to be implied or framed through aftermath rather than lingering, gleeful detail. Still, the emotional weight accumulates. There were a few nights where I definitely watched something lighter afterward just to clear my head. All that said, I'm really glad this series exists. It doesn't pretend to offer solutions to mass incarceration or abuse of power. It's not a policy white paper. What it does is something fiction is uniquely good at. It makes abstract problems feel like people. It turns prisoner number 3482-9 was enrolled in an unauthorized trial into one specific man, with a scar on his chin and a laugh that sounds like gravel, who misses his mom and is terrified that his nightmares aren't just nightmares. After spending time with him, it's very hard to go back to reading those kinds of sentences in news blurbs and shrugging. On Flick Flare, I try not to throw around must-watch like candy, because not everything is for everyone, and not everything needs to be watched. But if your gut tells you you can handle the heaviness, and you're drawn to character-driven dramas that aren't afraid to make you sit in discomfort, No Cage Can Hold is absolutely worth your time. It's not perfect, no show is, but its heart and craft are so clearly in the right place that the rough edges feel more like scars than mistakes. If you made it all the way through this deep dive, first of all, you have my respect. There's a lot in this series and a lot in unpacking it. If you decide to check it out, or if you already have and you're replaying certain scenes in your head right now, drop your thoughts, your favorite moments, the characters you can't stop thinking about. I'm really curious who you found yourself unexpectedly caring about. And if you want more conversations like this, where we sit with a show, argue with it a little, let it get under our skin, and then talk it out, you know what to do. Stick around, hit subscribe if you haven't, keep the comments alive. For now, take whatever breath you need after all that concrete and barbed wire, maybe touch some grass. And I'll catch you in the next breakdown.